with his rod, and water came forth abundantly. And the congregation their beasts drank. But the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, because you have not believed me to treat me as holy in the sight of the sons of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land which I have given them. Can you imagine? Okay, first off, what was Moses supposed to do? Speak. Speak to the rock. Have a little conversation, right? A little dialogue. Speak to the rock. We don't know if the rock's going to respond. That's not important. Speak to the rock that it may yield its water. Right? What does Moses do? Strikes it. How many times? Twice. Oh, he struck it twice. Okay, did he obey the Lord? No. So God, who is holy, tells him what to do. Right? Tells him what to do. He disobeys God and goes back to what he knows works. He's struck that rock before. He knows that when you hit it, water comes forth. Let's do that again. I'll trust in myself. Why do I need to trust in the Lord? All right? I'll do what I know works. He strikes them. And all of a sudden, God, is he pleased? No, God is not pleased. God is very upset with him. So upset that he does not allow Moses to enter the promised land. Isn't that amazing? Moses has killed an Egyptian, and God forgave him. Right? Moses rejected God, ran away into the desert. God forgave him. Moses didn't want to obey God and go and bring his people out of slavery. He said, find somebody else. God forgave him. Over and over and over again. Moses failed, and God forgives. Moses is supposed to speak to a rock. All of a sudden, something is so important to God that because he hits a rock twice, you're not allowed in the promised land. Okay, now who here thinks God overreacted? Put your hands down, hands down. God never overreacts, okay? He's kind of perfect. Okay, so what gives? What's the problem here? Okay. Well, the problem is first and foremost that, yes, he did embarrass God. Well, not embarrass, but you know what I mean? Demean the authority of God in front of the assembly of the people. He did not recognize him as holy and as one to be obeyed immediately, exactly as he should have been. Okay? So that we can grant. Okay? But there's something, I think, that is even more foundational. Okay? Because take a look at the first passage again, Exodus 17, and what I've highlighted for you. Right? God has said, behold, I will stand before you there on the rock at Horeb, and you shall strike the rock. Now, if you strike the rock and the Lord is standing right there above the rock, who do you actually strike? The Lord. Isn't that weird? Isn't that strange? You're actually striking the Lord. He allows himself to be stricken. Okay? In a very unusual way. We still don't know the meaning of this. But let's go down to 1 Corinthians 10, verse 4. Right? And actually, if we had the previous week's notes, remember when we looked at the cloud? This is the second half of that passage that we looked at last week, where it said, they all went through the water, and they were all under the cloud. Do you remember that? And they all drank the same spiritual drink, for they were drinking from a spiritual rock that followed them, and the rock was Christ. Okay? So in the New Testament, we have a different interpretation. Paul now tells us that the rock that they drank from was Christ. It was God, right? And God the Father allows Christ to be stricken, but only once, right? He allows his Son to die on the cross once, and once only. After that, if you want to yield the spiritual graces that poured forth from his heart when he's on the... Do you remember when water pours from his heart? Right? If he is the rock and water comes forth out of his heart, right? From now on, after he's allowed to be stricken once, now we speak the words. We ask, we pray. Right? And during the Eucharist, the priest prays the words of consecration, and those graces flow forth abundantly. But he's only allowed to be stricken once. and that's it. Thereafter, the glory, right? After that, he's resurrected and glorified. And even though this is a prefigurement and almost a symbolic representation of what's to come, just like the power of the blood of the Lamb having so much power, even though it foreshadows something even greater, it was powerful enough that death passed over, right? The blood of the Lamb. In the same way, the rock signifies Christ, prefigures, foreshadows Christ who is coming, who is so much greater and so much more powerful, and even though he is more powerful in the future, and this is just a shadow, it still contains that power and that grace that you strike it only once. Right? In the same way that Moses with his veil, remember, because he was shining forth the glory of God, was just a shadow of the transfigured Christ who reveals his glory. All the time, what you're going to notice is that in the Old Testament, in the Old Covenant, we have a shadow, a prefigurement, and the greatness is revealed in the New Covenant. Okay? And that's why St. Paul so boldly says, and the rock was Christ. Does that make sense? So in that sense now, hopefully we can understand why Moses was punished so severely. This was no ordinary rock. The Lord stood upon this rock, allowed himself to be stricken, allowed, the spiritual water to come forth. Okay, let's go on. From this point forward in the Old Testament, okay, this is the first time we hear about this rock and water coming from the rock, okay, and that the Lord gave them water from the rock in the desert. After that, every time we hear the Lord's name, the word rock is now interchangeable with the very name of God. Isn't that neat? And so I've written down here under God's name a whole pile of passages, and you know what? I didn't put down all the passages. There were just too many to include. I just picked and chose some of my favorites. There are so many throughout the Psalms and the prophets. Okay, so here's a sampling. The mighty one of Jacob, the shepherd, the stone of Israel. Isn't that cool? God is the stone of Israel. For I proclaim the name of the Lord, ascribe greatness to our God, the rock. His work is perfect. You neglected the rock who begot you, and forgot the God who gave you birth. The Lord lives, and blessed be my rock, and exalted be God, the rock of my salvation. The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, my God, my rock in whom I take refuge. So do you see that throughout the Psalms now? God is given a name, right? And he's called the rock. It's cool. He's not Rocky, okay, with the theme song. And he's not like that wrestler, The Rock. He is the true rock. He's the real rock, right? And you can trust in him, and you can count on him, and he will never, ever be shaken or broken, right? He is firm and solid and strong, and you can you place your trust upon him, right? Everything is great. Here's our big problem now. Why does Jesus give Simon a name that belongs to God alone? That's kind of strange. What will Peter's role be? Right? This is the significance of this event for us in the Gospels isn't made known immediately, right? In fact, immediately after Jesus says, "You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church," right? You go down just a few passages later, and you have Peter finding out that Jesus is planning to, predicting the fact that he will be crucified, right? That he's going to die in Jerusalem, and he's telling them what's going to happen. And what does Peter say? He responds and said, "No, let this not happen. Let it not be." And Jesus, how does he respond then? "Get behind me, Satan." Okay, the word Satan means adversary. From giving him the name of God Almighty, few passages, and now he's given the name of the devil. What a range, right? 2 names in one day, and oh my goodness, you couldn't be further apart. Okay? But it reveals his humanity, right? That he is being prepared. He's given a title and a role that he's not yet ready to fill. Right? And in fact, we see how weak he is when he denies Jesus. Well, later on, right, we have to note that he says, when Jesus speaks to him, "You are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church." He's not building the church now on Peter. Peter is not ready. Peter's not solid enough. Okay, things have to change. So, keep that in mind. Are we okay with that? And let's go on. Okay. So, Genesis 28. This is a cool passage. Verses 10 to 22. Jacob had a dream. And behold, a ladder was set on the earth with its top reaching to heaven. That's a long, long ladder. You can imagine it. Okay. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. Now, I don't know about you, but I figure an angel with wings shouldn't have to ascend and descend on a ladder, right? Because that's a heck of a lot more work than just flying around. Okay. But anyway, okay. And behold, the Lord stood above it. So the Lord's in heaven. He's always opening heaven, looking down. What's going on with you people? Okay, Lord stood above it and said, "I am the Lord. I am with you. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you." And he promises all the land and the blessing, everything that he later promises to Abraham. If you remember our covenant day, right? Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, "Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven." So Jacob rose early in the morning and took the stone that he had put under his head and set it up as a pillar and poured oil on its top. He called the name of that place Bethel. "This stone which I have set up as a pillar will be God's house." Isn't that interesting? Okay. He pours oil on it. Do you remember last time we looked at the word Christ? And what does Christ mean?
Anointed one.
Anointed one. Anointed with oil, right? So this rock has become an anointed one, a Christ. Okay? You see that kind of happening? Okay. He called the name of that place Bethel. Now, who knows their Hebrew? Who knows what Beth means? House. Right? That's what it means. Okay? And El is short for El Shaddai. Okay? So, house of God. He names the place, the city becomes house of God. Okay, Bethel. If you, there's another word, another city with the word Beth in it. Bethlehem. Lahem means bread. House of bread. Right? That's a whole other day. But it's cool. Okay. So Beth Jacob, sometimes you'll hear synagogues are named Beth Jacob or yes, house. Okay. Okay, so he called it Bethel. And he says, this is the gate of heaven. This is the way to get into heaven. We've got to find a way to climb up this ladder. That'd be cool, right? Finding this ladder. Well, if you take a look, the next sheet there, John 1, verse 42, you'll find out how Jesus explains this, okay? Jesus saw Nathanael coming to him. Now, just so you know, when Philip, I think it's Philip, goes to Nathanael and says, "We have found the Messiah," right? Nathanael's, and he says, "He's from Nazareth." Do you remember what Nathanael answers? Yes. What good can come from Nazareth? Oh. And he's not. And what's the answer? Come and see. So they both go over. Okay, and Jesus, now we're in the passage here. Jesus saw Nathanael coming to him and said of him, "Behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom there is no deceit." Now, let me just stop you there again. Israel, who was Israel? Jacob, right? We've just read about Jacob and his ladder, right? Jacob later on wrestles with the angel of the Lord, wrestles with God, right? And his name is changed. From now on, you will no longer be Jacob, you will be called Israel.